Good morning. It is 11:40 a.m. on Sunday, October 25th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I've actually been up for a while. This is 5 more minutes. The reason I've been up for a while is because I rather ill I was going to say ill-advisedly, except no one actually advised me to do it. I was kind of toying with, I know I'm addicted to caffeine, but let's try out cutting back on it for a couple of days and see what happens. It turns out I'm a mess when that happens, and so I was not feeling up to doing really anything this morning until uh you see yes, until I've caffeinated myself and got through a little bit more of the day. So here I am now, recaffeinated, thank God, and here to talk about The Legend of Korra, Season 3, Episode. Which one? I'm on the wrong page. I want to say six. Fifth episode of Season 3, The Metal Clan. This is a fun episode in the sense that it takes some of the. It feels lower stakes in the main storyline anyway. It takes the big socio-political nation building stakes and dials it back a little bit to just kind of explore family drama instead, but with some excellently building tension in the background of continuing to follow Zahir and Zahir's plan. But let's start with Korra and the gang, and in particular, now that Korra is traveling with Lin Beifong about, ostensibly to keep her safe from Zahir while they continue to look for more airbenders. Because Korra basically says, I'm not going to stop looking for more airbenders, even if you think that that's not the safest thing for me to do. So they are currently kind of on the run, finding out of the way places. There's some fun stuff with Korra throwing a ball long distances for Naga to chase after, like a dog playing fetch, right? And there's some fun stuff there. And then we set up that, it's interesting because I kind of still think of her as Lin, but they certainly address her as Beifong in this episode. So maybe I just need to switch that in my head. But they talk to her, but it establishes up front, even before they have gone to Zaofu, this city where her sister lives, that she's in kind of a sour, grumpy mood. Not that she's not always kind of like that, but she's continuing to be like that, including deliberately popping Naga's ball. Completely unnecessary. Anyway, though, when the latest report of a newfound airbender is reported to be in Zaofu, that's where they're heading. Beifong doesn't tell them about anything about that, her connections there, and in fact, otherwise just says, I'm going to stay on the airship. Don't tell anyone I'm here, which is already kind of suspicious. But she seems not inclined to explain or elaborate, so they say, all right. And only when they are called on it by one of the one of her. So let's see. It's we meet. I'm forgetting Suyin. Suyin is the sister's name. So when they meet her, and she has an advisor that can apparently use like the sound of people's heartbeats and stuff like that to tell when people are lying, sniffs out that Beifong is actually on the airship, and everyone discovers, oh my gosh, Suyin is her sister, but they don't get along. They have not spoken in 30 years. That is more than just a sort of trivial, well, especially it's more than just a trivial squabble, but it also seems entirely one-sided in the sense that Suyin, although there's clearly tension there, seems very interested and invested in having Beifong become, well, okay. I'm going to call her Lin still, because even though I think maybe they're addressing her as Beifong formally, because, her sister is Suyin Beifong. Um, I, it's okay. Lin and Suyin. And, hang on a second. Rocket, what are you doing? Rocket, come. Sorry, he's hungry for lunch. It's almost lunchtime, but not quite. So, but the fact that Suyin and her whole clan there seem very eager to have Lin, be part of their lives again. So the drive to keep them apart is still all one-sided in that regard. So we can't help but wonder what could have happened to be so, like, it's one thing that they're very different personalities and different professions, but what could have happened to make Lin so determined to not be part of that family anymore? 1 second. Rocket? No. No. Working on puppy behavior. So, sorry about that. But yeah, so we are left to wonder. We don't get resolution to that in this episode, other than to see just how determined Lin is. Enough to be mean to her earnest, wide-eyed niece, making her cry, just to not even explain what the problem is. Which is just like, it seems pretty extreme, right? So we want to know more about it, but obviously Lin understands that now that we have met Opal, who is this new airbender, her niece, and there's a little bit of tension from this idea of like, well, Opal should come with us. No, Opal should stay here and be trained here. And there's a little bit of like, well, we haven't resolved that question yet either. But I do like all of the world building stuff about the Metal Clan and their whole city here, and some of the amazing stuff that they've got going there with having so many metal benders around, and the nature of the city with these big, flower-like protective shields, and just like the dance routine that we see being rehearsed. And just as a note for people who have seen the whole run, one of the dancers is actually Kuvira, who is also seen on a newspaper in this episode. So they're building some season 4 foreshadowing in here, which is interesting. But it's we also meet like the rest of the family, and so we got all of the different kids with their own things, and having each of those kids like apparently part of the culture here being encouraging people to have multiple pursuits and hobbies. So we've got the artist kid and the jock twins. And Rocket, I'm going to put you in the other room. I swear. You do not get to just demand food. No. No. Wow. My routine is way off this morning, which is part of what has got him in such a tizzy. But in any case, I feel like, meeting all of them, it being very fancy, but there being this tension that isn't resolved yet, not knowing exactly how that all needs to play out. It's interesting stuff, but it's also not as much to talk about because it's all kind of set up. But we do have a little bit more with there being an obvious sort of flirtation and chemistry between Bolin and Opal. And we see the frankly horrifying difference between Bolin when he's being casual and not thinking about dating versus when he turns it on. And thankfully we have Opal rightfully reacting very reasonably to that, which is, I thought you were kind of cute and sweet before, but this thing that you're doing right now, no, don't do that. I don't like that. And so it's we've got some burgeoning stuff here, but it's a lot of it is, it is set up and asking questions that we don't yet have the answers to. But the last little thread that I'll mention in this part of the story is, of course, that Varric shows up, and Varric is great. I miss Varric because he's great, and it's so fun just to have his chaotic neutral presence in the show again. I love this whole idea of like, how can you be working with a criminal? And he's like, technically, I was never convicted. And then it's like, that's only because you escaped before your trial. And he's like, well, the universe set me free. And technically, from his perspective, you could say, well, like the vines broke open his cell. So sure. Right? Yeah, so lots of stuff being set up in that. We get some interesting tidbits of what Toph was like as a mother. And we get, we explain, so Toph, of course, grew up in a very restrictive home. And so she went kind of completely the opposite end of the spectrum with her own kids, where like Suyin and Lin had different fathers, but neither of them even knew their fathers. And they were basically allowed to do just whatever they want. But that can be, there's good and bad about that, right? So, lots of new threads introduced in this episode. It's kind of the beginning of a new arc, right? So, let's talk about Zahir and him showing up with a new shaved head and beard, coming into the Northern Air Temple, basically looking for the Avatar. And boy, there's some just great sinister tension in there because, of course, we recognize him from his voice at least, and just know that like, what's he doing there? He's obviously dangerous. What does he want? He's looking for the Avatar, but she's not there. So what? What is he gonna do? What is he gonna do? And so we see him demonstrate that he's already got mastery of a number of elements of airbending, which we knew, but he's impressing, the kids who remain there, who are doing some of the airbending training for the airbenders who have remained there. He's impressing everybody, but there's also a little bit of something's a little bit off with him, which, we certainly know. But certainly when he sneaks into Tenzin's study in the temple in the middle of the night, and Iki finds him and basically challenges him that like, you're not allowed in here. And there's just this razor's edge tension there of like, oh God, he seems like the kind of guy who might do something to a kid, right? So what's going to happen here? But we see that he has gone in there and taken a little amulet that has poems from Guru Lagima, who has various poems that Zahir has already quoted in various places, including the lines like, instinct is a lie told by a fearful body hoping to be wrong. That's what he said to the Order of the White Lotus when he escaped from his prison. And then also, let go your earthly tether, enter the void, empty and become wind. And new growth cannot exist without first the destruction of the old. And so some of those seem vaguely ominous, and he seems determined to go in there and take that thing, even though what's going on. And then so Kaya shows up, and we relax a little bit because at least, we don't have a kid being in danger by herself. And then we, she's sent back to bed. But Kaya is suspicious too. Like, she doesn't believe this guy that's like, oh, you just couldn't sleep, so you wandered into the one room in the temple that you're not allowed to go. Come on. it's that whole like, I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night sort of thing. And so it's such a cool scene and so well written, just the tension of her questioning him and kind of trying to feel out what his deal is, and vaguely asking, questions that sort of build until, he's just like, oh, I've always admired the air nomads. I always studied the history even before I learned the airbending. And but when he claims to be from a small village in the north, it's a little bit unclear what exactly the trigger is, like whether he gives the true answer about where he's from and Kaya knows that's where Zerhir is from, or whether that is just enough talking for her to finally figure out who he must be. But clearly she knows who Zahir is, which makes sense, right? Because she's Tenzin's sister. And so if we know that his previous attempt to kidnap the Avatar was why Tenzin and Tarlok decided to have her stay at the Southern Water Tribe, right? At the South Pole, all protected there. So it makes sense that Tenzin's sister would know about that, right? And so she figures out who he must be, and immediately now we're in a fight. And it is an excellent fight that starts, in these cramped confines of the hallways with her water bending, him air bending. And then finally he literally just crashes through the wall. He's got an airbending staff glider thing, but then she grabs him with the water tendril and slams him back down to the ground, and they're fighting. It's just an excellent fight that is so exciting and cathartic because of the tension of the scene that built up to it. But alas, even when, even though Kaya is pretty strong as a waterbender herself, he is, he's a match for her at least. And then once some of the White Lotus guards start coming up to help, he is able to escape and vanishes into the night. And so, yikes, right? Zahir is a cool villain in this series. Like, I've talked about it before, but him and his crew, definitely the best of the 4-season villains. Anyway, let's leave it there, and I'll be back to talk about the next episode, Old Wounds, next week. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.